The massive HFY ship dwarfed the human delegation's vessel as it approached Earth's orbital station. Dr. Jaiwo Park adjusted her uniform collar nervously. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had been selected to represent humanity in this historic meeting with the fearsome predator species that had recently invited Earth to join the Galactic Confederation. "Remember," Director Taeho Kim whispered beside her, "the HFY are apex predators. Show respect but never fear." The airlock hissed open. Jaiwo steeled herself as the first HFY stepped through, 3 meters tall with sleek silver blue fur, powerful legs, and amber eyes that seemed to assess every molecule of the room. Behind this imposing figure came 3 more, each carrying elaborate staffs showing their rank. "I am Vorax," the lead HFY announced, voice surprisingly melodic. "High Commander of the Southern Fleet." His gaze settled on Jaiwo. "You are the one who studies life?" "Yes," Jaiwo replied, maintaining eye contact despite her racing heart. "Dr. Jaiwo Park, xenobiologist." Vorax's large head tilted slightly. "Your species interests us greatly. Most beings react with terror when meeting us. You show caution but not fear. Humans are curious by nature," Taeho explained. "We've long wondered if we were alone in the universe." The meeting continued for several hours. The HFY explained that the Galactic Confederation included 12 spacefaring species, with the HFY being among the oldest members. Earth would be invited to join as a protected developing world. 1 month later, Jaiwo found herself aboard the science vessel Horizon, traveling to the HFY homeworld. 3 other human scientists accompanied her: Donghyun Lee, a geneticist, Min Hassan, an engineer, and Juno Kang, a linguist. Their mission was to learn about HFY biology and culture. "I still can't believe they selected us," Donghyun said as they watched stars streak by. "The Confederation has strict rules about contact with new species. They seem especially interested in humans," Jaiwo noted. Vorax mentioned several times how unusual our response was. When they arrived at the HFY homeworld, Narek, they were greeted by senior researcher Korvax. He was younger than Vorax, with darker blue fur and intense focus in his amber eyes. "Welcome to Narek," he said curtly. "You will be the first non-HFY to study at our Central Science Academy." The first week was challenging. The other HFY scientists kept their distance, clearly uncomfortable with human presence. Jaiwo focused on her work, studying HFY cellular structures and comparing them to Earth biology. Everything changed during their second week. Jaiwo was working late in the laboratory when an alarm sounded. The door slid open, and Korvax rushed in, looking agitated. "Come quickly," he ordered. "There's been an incident." He led her to a secure area she had never seen before. Inside, a small HFY, clearly a juvenile, lay on an examination table, breathing with difficulty. "This is my sister's cub," Korvax explained. "She consumed a toxic plant. Our treatments aren't working. Your report on human antitoxin methods." Jaiwo understood immediately. "I can help," she said, already examining the small patient. The young HFY looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. Working quickly, Jaiwo adapted an Earth treatment protocol for the HFY biology. Within hours, the cub was breathing easier. By morning, she was sitting up, her natural silver blue color returning. Korvax watched with amazement as the cub allowed Jaiwo to check her vital signs without protest. "She trusts you," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "This is unusual. Our cubs typically fear all non-HFY." "Perhaps she knows I want to help," Jaiwo suggested. Word spread quickly through the academy. The next day, 3 more HFY scientists approached Jaiwo with questions about human medicine. By the end of the month, she had been invited to observe something no non-HFY had ever seen: the nursery chambers. Standing at the entrance to the large, warmly lit room, Jaiwo gasped softly. Dozens of HFY cubs played under the watchful eyes of adult caretakers. When they noticed her, instead of hiding, several cubs approached curiously. "This is unprecedented," Korvax said, standing beside her. "They sense something in you, in all humans perhaps, that puts them at ease." Later that evening, Korvax made a startling proposal. I believe humans have a unique compatibility with our species. Would you be willing to join a long-term research mission? We need to understand why our young trust you instinctively. Jaiwo didn't hesitate. Of course, she replied, feeling that something important was beginning. This could be the start of a remarkable partnership. She had no idea just how remarkable it would become, or that in a few short months, this unusual trust between species would be tested in ways no one could imagine. The HFY research station orbited their homeworld like a silver crescent. From the observation deck, Jaiwo watched the swirling violet storms below while entering notes into her tablet. 3 months had passed since she began her extended research mission, and each day brought new discoveries. The neural response samples are ready, Dr. Park, announced her assistant, Donghyun Lee, interrupting her thoughts. She followed him to the laboratory where senior researcher Korvax was waiting. The tall HFY scientist had been her reluctant host initially, but now worked alongside her with growing respect. Your theory about pheromone recognition has merit, Korvax admitted, tapping a crystalline display with one clawed finger. See how the limbic centers respond to human biomarkers? It resembles our cub's signature. Jaiwo leaned closer. That would explain the trust anomaly. Your species instinctively categorizes humans as safe caretakers? Korvax's ears flattened. A sign of contemplation. Perhaps. Tomorrow you can observe directly. My clutch sister has permitted you to view her new cubs. This was unprecedented access. No non-HFY had ever been allowed near newborns. The next day, Jaiwo stood breathless at the nursery entrance. Inside, 3 small cubs with downy gray fur tumbled over each other while their mother watched protectively. When Jaiwo entered, the mother tensed but didn't intervene. This is Mara, Korvax introduced his sister. And these are her cubs, Tyro, Lena, and Vex. Mara nodded respectfully. Your reputation precedes you, Dr. Park. Korvax speaks highly of your work. To everyone's surprise, the smallest cub Vex approached Jaiwo and sniffed her hand. Then, in a move that made Mara gasp, the cub climbed into Jaiwo's lap. I've never seen this, Mara whispered. Even among our own kind, cubs are cautious with strangers. Jaiwo sat perfectly still, afraid to disturb the moment. May I touch him? Mara nodded. Carefully, Jaiwo stroked the cub's soft fur. Vex made a purring sound and settled more comfortably. Korvax recorded everything. The implications are significant. If humans naturally produce chemical signals that soothe our young, there could be applications throughout the Confederation. Later that week, other HFY parents began requesting Jaiwo's presence during medical examinations of their cubs. The young HFY were notoriously difficult to treat when ill. They became aggressive when frightened, but with Jaiwo nearby, they remained calm. One evening, as she analyzed new data in the lab, Jaiwo noticed something unusual. Donghyun, look at this pattern. Human pheromones don't just register as safe to HFY cubs, they register specifically as protector. Donghyun studied the scans. That's remarkable. Their brains categorize us as guardians, not just non-threats. There's something more basic at work here, Jaiwo mused. Something evolutionary. Their conversation was interrupted when the lab door slid open. Korvax entered with 2 visitors, high-ranking HFY military officers. This is Commander Ryza, Korvax introduced the female HFY with battle-scarred fur. And Sub-Commander Dorn. They wish to discuss your findings. Commander Ryza's amber eyes studied Jaiwo intensely. Your discovery has implications beyond science, Dr. Park. For millennia, our cubs have reacted with fear to all non-HFY species. This instinct has shaped our diplomacy and military strategy. If humans are truly different. We're still conducting research, Jaiwo cautioned. But yes, the data suggests a unique compatibility. Ryza nodded slowly. I have authorized expanded access. Tomorrow, you will visit our primary cub education center on the surface. The next day, Jaiwo and Donghyun descended to the planet's surface on a military shuttle. The landscape below was breathtaking, vast purple forests and gleaming crystal formations under the light of 3 moons. The education center was built into a mountainside. Inside, dozens of HFY cubs of various ages learned and played. When the human visitors entered, all activity stopped as curious young eyes turned toward them. A small female cub approached Jaiwoo. "You smell different," she said in careful standard language. "But nice. Like safety." This simple observation confirmed everything their research suggested. Later, as they observed a play session, Jaiwoo noticed how the youngest cubs kept glancing her way, as if reassured by her presence. "They're using you as a security reference," explained the head teacher, an elderly HFY named Cyvax. "Just as they would an adult protector." That night, as Jaiwoo recorded her observations, the station's alarms blared to life. Korvax's voice came through the communication system, tense and urgent, "All personnel to emergency stations. Settlement collapse on the surface. Cubs trapped." Jaiwoo jumped to her feet, heart pounding. She knew immediately this was the moment when theory would become reality. The trust between species was about to be tested in the most critical way possible. The shuttle descended through violet clouds toward the disaster site. A mountainside settlement had partially collapsed after a seismic event, leaving several structures dangling precariously over a ravine. Emergency lights flashed around the perimeter as HFY rescue teams worked frantically. Jaiwoo, Donghyun, Minha, and 2 other humans from the research team stood near the command post. Commander Riza was coordinating rescue efforts, her powerful voice carrying over the chaos. "The nursery chamber is here," Korvax pointed to a holographic map as the rescue team gathered. 6 cubs trapped. The passages are compromised, too narrow for adult HFY to navigate. The structure had shifted during the quake, creating a deadly maze of twisted metal and stone. On the display, 6 small life signs pulsed weakly deep within the building. "Can't you cut through from above?" Donghyun asked. An HFY engineer shook his head. Any vibration could trigger complete collapse. Jaiwoo studied the map. The only way to the cubs was through a narrow maintenance tunnel, barely 60 centimeters wide. For the large HFY, it was impossible. Without speaking, Jaiwoo stepped forward. "We can fit," she said simply. Korvax turned sharply. "The risk is extreme. The structure could fully collapse at any moment." "We understand," replied Minha as she checked her equipment. "But those are children in there." The HFY rescue commander, Riza, studied them with newfound interest. "Why would you risk yourselves for cubs not your own?" Donghyun smiled grimly while securing a medical kit to his belt. "It's what humans do." Korvax seemed troubled. "I cannot order this." "You're not ordering anything," Jaiwoo said calmly. "We're volunteering." The plan came together quickly. The humans would enter through a maintenance hatch, navigate to the nursery chamber, and escort the cubs back one by one. They would wear lightweight breathing apparatus and carry basic medical supplies. "The air inside may be contaminated," warned an HFY medic. "And the temperature is dropping as night approaches." Jaiwoo nodded grimly. "How much time do the cubs have? Without warmth or proper air?" "Perhaps 3 hours." The entry point was a jagged tear in the structure's side. HFY engineers stabilized the opening as best they could, but everyone knew it was temporary. Jaiwoo went first, sliding headfirst into the narrow passage. The metal was cold against her palms as she pulled herself forward. Behind her came Donghyun, then Minha, and the others. Inside was chaos, twisted metal, shattered stone, and darkness broken only by their helmet lights. The air smelled of dust and something alien, a chemical tang from damaged systems. "Life signs 20 meters ahead," Minha reported, checking her scanner. They crawled through increasingly tight spaces. Twice they had to backtrack when passages ended in impossible tangles of debris. The structure groaned around them, shifting slightly with each movement. "This whole section could go any minute," Donghyun whispered as they paused at an intersection. Jaiwoo checked her map. The nursery should be just beyond that bulkhead. They squeezed through another gap, emerging into what had once been a corridor. The floor tilted at a dangerous angle. At the end, a reinforced door hung partly open. "That's it," Jaiwoo said, moving carefully toward it. The nursery chamber was designed to withstand damage. Built like a safe room, it had protected its occupants from the worst of the collapse. But it was now tilted precariously, half suspended over a growing chasm where the building was splitting apart. In the corner, 6 small cubs huddled together, whimpering softly. They were younger than Jaiwoo had expected, none older than what would be a human toddler. When they saw the humans, they didn't retreat in fear as expected. Instead, the largest cub cautiously approached Jaiwoo, sniffing curiously. "That's right," she whispered, extending her hand slowly. "We're here to help." The moment of connection was shattered by a violent tremor. The ceiling began to crack, sending dust and small debris raining down. "We need to move now," Donghyun shouted. Minha's scanner blared a warning. "Structural integrity failing. We have minutes at most." Jaiwoo made a quick decision. "Donghyun, take the first cub back immediately. Minha, prepare the second. I'll keep the others calm." The young HFY cub seemed to understand the danger. It allowed Donghyun to pick it up without protest. He quickly disappeared back into the passage with his precious cargo. Another tremor, stronger than the first, shook the room. A large section of ceiling collapsed nearby, narrowly missing them. Outside, Korvax paced anxiously as the minutes ticked by. When Donghyun emerged with the first cub, a cheer went up from the HFY rescuers. The cub was quickly taken by medical staff. 5 more inside, Donghyun gasped, already turning to go back in. "But we're running out of time." As if an answer, a deep rumbling sound came from within the structure. The ground itself seemed to shake. "It's coming down," someone shouted inside the failing structure. Jaiwoo felt the floor shift beneath her feet. The 5 remaining cubs huddled against her, sensing her as their protector. She had to remain calm despite the chaos around them. "Form a chain," Jaiwoo ordered as debris rained down around them. "Minha at the rear, Donghyun with me at point." They worked quickly, each human taking responsibility for guiding 1 or 2 cubs. The smallest cub, barely old enough to walk, clung to Jaiwoo's neck as she navigated the treacherous path back. "This way," she guided, speaking in a soothing voice even as the structure groaned around them. The cub's tiny claws dug into her shoulder, not painfully but seeking security. Donghyun took the lead with another cub, moving carefully through the tilting corridor. "The main passage is blocked," he called back after checking ahead. Ceiling collapsed. The cubs whimpered, their sensitive ears picking up sounds the humans couldn't hear, the subtle shifting of support beams, the cracking of foundations deep below. "Alternative path detected," Minha called out, pointing to an even narrower maintenance shaft. "It's tight but should connect back to the exit point." The new path was barely wide enough for an adult human to crawl through. For the cubs, it was manageable, but Jaiwoo worried about keeping them calm in such a confined space. "I'll go first with the smallest," she decided. "Donghyun, stay in the middle with 2. Minha, bring up the rear with the other 2. The cubs were remarkably cooperative, seemingly sensing the humans' protective intent. One by one they entered the narrow shaft, moving in single file through the darkness. Jaiwoo kept talking softly to the cub in her arms, mixing Korean lullabies with simple reassurances. "Just a little further," she promised, though she wasn't certain herself. The shaft seemed endless, twisting through the building's infrastructure. Pipes ran alongside them, some leaking unknown fluids. The air grew thinner despite their breathing apparatus. Halfway through, they encountered another obstacle, a section where the shaft had partially collapsed, leaving a gap barely 30 centimeters high. "Cubs first," Jaiwoo instructed. The young HFY were small enough to wiggle through without difficulty. The humans would have a harder time. Minha helped push the cubs through the gap from behind while Donghyun received them on the other side. When all 5 cubs were safely through, the humans began their own difficult passage. "I can see the exit point," Donghyun called from ahead. "Maybe 20 meters more." Just then, the entire structure shifted dramatically. The shaft tilted, and a terrible groaning sound filled the air. Jaiwoo, still squeezing through the narrow gap, felt the metal around her begin to bend. "Move," she shouted. "It's coming down." The next moments were a blur of motion and dust. The cubs moved with surprising speed, their instincts taking over. Donghyun guided them forward while Minha pushed from behind. Jaiwoo, trapped in the middle where the shaft was narrowest, struggled to free herself as the metal closed around her. They were meters from the exit when the final collapse began. The shaft fractured, creating a widening gap in the floor. On the far side, Donghyun held the 5 cubs, unable to reach back for Jaiwoo. "Jump," he yelled to her. Jaiwoo pulled herself free from the bent metal, her uniform tearing and her skin scraping painfully. The gap was now a meter wide and growing. Beyond it, safety. Behind her, certain death as the structure continued to crumble. With a final desperate effort, she leaped across the gap, her hands grasping the edge of the broken shaft. For a terrible moment, she hung suspended over the abyss, her grip weakening. Then strong hands grabbed her wrists, Donghyun pulling from above, and surprisingly, the tiny claws of the cubs helping too, their strength remarkable for their size. With their combined effort, Jaiwoo pulled herself up and over. Together, the humans and cubs crawled the final distance to the exit. Outside, in the violet light of dusk, Korvax watched in astonishment as they emerged from the doomed building. Donghyun came first, guiding 3 cubs. Then Minha with another. Finally, Jaiwoo appeared, carrying the smallest cub tightly against her chest. As they cleared the danger zone, the entire structure gave way with a thunderous roar, collapsing into the ravine below. Medical teams rushed forward. The cubs were quickly examined, found shaken but largely unharmed. The humans hadn't fared as well. Jaiwoo had a deep gash on her leg and several broken ribs. Donghyun's arm was badly sprained. Minha had suffered a concussion. "You are injured severely," Korvax observed, his voice unusually gentle as he approached Jaiwoo where she sat being treated by a medic. Jaiwoo managed to smile through gritted teeth. "The cubs?" "All unharmed," he confirmed, mandibles clicking with emotion. "You protected them as if they were your own young." "They are young," she replied simply before the pain overwhelmed her. As she drifted into unconsciousness, Jaiwoo heard Ryza speaking to the gathered HFY, "Remember this day. Remember what these humans have done. This changes everything." Behind her closed eyes, Jaiwoo saw not darkness but the grateful amber eyes of the cubs they had saved. In that moment, despite her pain, she felt a profound sense of purpose-fulfilled. Recovery was slow. Human healing couldn't match HFY regeneration, and Jaiwoo spent weeks in the medical bay with her fractured leg and internal injuries. What surprised her was the constant stream of HFY visitors. Not just scientists but settlement dwellers, bringing traditional healing items and sitting quietly beside her bed. Korvax visited daily, often bringing research updates but increasingly engaging in personal conversation. As the day progressed, he would tell her about HFY culture and history while she shared stories of Earth. One morning, he arrived with uncharacteristic hesitation. He paced the room before finally speaking. "The High Council has made a decision," he announced. "Humans are to be formally recognized as Shivaka." "What does that mean?" Jaiwoo asked, sitting up despite her discomfort. "The closest translation is those who guard the future. It is our highest designation for protectors of young." His ears flattened in what she now recognized as emotional significance. No non-HFY has ever received this honor. Jaiwoo was speechless. When she could finally speak, she asked, "Because of the rescue?" "Not just the rescue," Korvax explained. "Our scientists have been studying the data for months. Humans produce specific pheromone patterns that our cubs instinctively trust. But the rescue proved something more important. Your willingness to risk your lives for our young matches the chemical promise. Form and function align perfectly." 2 days later, Donghyun and Minha visited, both still recovering from their own injuries. "Have you heard?" Minha asked excitedly. "There's going to be a formal ceremony. Representatives from the entire Confederation are coming." Donghyun looked slightly embarrassed. "Apparently we're going to be famous throughout known space." Jaiwo shook her head in wonder. All because we did what any human would do. That's exactly the point, Minha replied. What's instinctive to us is revolutionary to them. The ceremony took place in the Great Hall of the research station. Representatives from throughout the Confederation attended, curious about this unprecedented development. The human rescuers, still bearing visible injuries, stood before the HFY Council as Riza, the rescue commander, recounted their actions. Without thought for themselves, these humans entered certain danger, she proclaimed. They shielded our cubs with their bodies. They demonstrate what we have always believed impossible, that protection of young transcends species. Jaiwo noticed the other Confederation representatives watching with various expressions. Some seemed doubtful, others curious, a few clearly uncomfortable. The concept of interspecies trust at this level was revolutionary. The High Elder, a venerable HFY with silver-streaked fur, approached Jaiwo. In her arms, she carried a newborn cub, its eyes barely open. Dr. Jaiwo Park, will you hold this child of our world? She asked. The hall fell silent. Every Confederation representative understood the significance of this moment. HFY never, ever willingly handed their newborns to outsiders. With steady hands, Jaiwo accepted the tiny cub, cradling it gently against her chest. The cub sniffed once, then settled contentedly, small paws gripping her finger. Humanity, the elder announced to the gathering, has proven what their biology first suggested. They are guardians by nature, protectors by choice. From this day forward, the children of Earth stand as Shivaka to the HFY people and to all the Confederation's young. After the ceremony, a reception followed. Representatives from other species approached the humans with new respect. A tall, insectoid diplomat clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. We have always feared the HFY, it admitted. Their protective instincts made them dangerous allies. If humans can bridge this gap, perhaps you can help forge deeper connections throughout the Confederation. Later, as the humans prepared to return to their quarters, Korvax approached Jaiwo privately. There is something I still do not understand, he admitted. Our scientists have confirmed the pheromone compatibility that initially drew us to trust humans. But that does not explain your willingness to die for young, not your own. Jaiwo considered how to explain something so fundamental to human nature. On Earth, she finally said, we have a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Humans evolved understanding that all children, regardless of parentage, are everyone's responsibility. We don't need biological connections to care. We just need to recognize vulnerability and potential. Korvax's expression shifted to the HFY equivalent of a smile. Then the Confederation has much to learn from Earth's village. 6 months later, the first cultural exchange program began. Young HFY cubs traveled to Earth, staying with human families. Young human children visited the HFY homeworld. Images of human children playing fearlessly with HFY cubs spread throughout the Confederation, changing perceptions of both species. And on planets throughout the Confederation, parents of all species began to whisper to their frightened children, do not fear the dark. The humans are watching over you. As for Jaiwo, she remained on the HFY homeworld, leading a new field of study, interspecies caregiving. The day that had begun with a disaster had ended by revealing humanity's greatest strength, not our technology or intellect, but our instinctive drive to protect the vulnerable, regardless of species. Perhaps, she wrote in her final report, this is why we were meant to find each other among the stars.